What does Beyoncé, parallel parking, newborns, and brown water have in common? Yes, yet another episode of Insecure. Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with another episode of Insecure, Season 4, Episode 4, Low-Key Losing It. This episode was directed by Nijla Mukmeen. She previously directed the 2018 film Jinn, which tells the story of a black teenage girl who must contend with her mother's sudden conversion to Islam and how that affects her upbringing, and just her life in general. I actually haven't had a chance to see it yet, but I have heard nothing but great things. So if you guys get a chance to watch it, please let me know what you think. So the central theme of this episode, I thought, was miscommunication and misperception. And I think when you have that in any relationship or any friendship, it's bound to cause problems. And if there are already problems, it will make those problems significantly worse. So we start off with Issa. She's in her apartment. She is continuing her plans with the block party. She's feeling good about where things are going. She has a headliner. She's getting the word out. We're getting the flyers. Everyone's getting really excited. So cool. But she is interrupted by a knock on the door, or shall I say several knocks on the door. And it is none other than her tenants, who quickly take her to task because she has forgotten to handle things with the water company, which means that none of them have water. That was something Issa was supposed to handle with the water company, but she didn't. So it looks like she's really trying to juggle her apartment manager duties and all her block party duties, but she is not really succeeding. And then we see Molly. She's at home. She's putting in a lot of work for her law firm. Andrew stops by, and of course, I'm about to have some intimate time. And right in the middle of it, Andrew kind of realizes that Molly isn't really into what's going on because she had like one little thing left to do. So she gets up, she's like, okay, just give me until 9. I've got this last little stuff to take care of, and then I'll come back and we can get into it, right? So Molly is working. She finally gets to a good stopping point, and she looks up, and it is almost 2 a.m. And I totally understand that. When you are really focused, time will just fly. When it's things that you're not invested in or you're not really interested in, then time seems to like, oh, okay, like when is this gonna be over? But when it's something you really give your attention to, time will fly. So she goes back in. Andrew has fallen asleep, but she wakes him up. They pick up right where they left off. No problem there. Elsewhere, Issa gets a call, and she directs it to her assistant, Sapphire, and puts the person on hold. Come to find out, it's the printer, and they're calling because they need the notes for the flyer that they're trying to get out for the block party before 5 o'clock. But Issa has been texting and trying to get in contact with Condola, and she hasn't heard anything. So she calls her, leaves her a voicemail like, hey, you know, we gotta get this done. Haven't heard from you. Let me know what's going on. I'm like, I'm starting to get a real bad feeling about this. And then we also see Molly hanging out with her colleagues. Looks like she's managed to smooth things over with them because last time she had actually kind of played them to the left to work with Torian, and then that kind of blew up in her face. So I'm guessing she ended up making amends and she's cool with them again. So that's cool. But, you know, they're working on discovery and emotions. They're getting all this work done. And it's looking like it's going to take a minute. She was supposed to go to a listening party with Andrew. Since the other 2 women are willing to put in all these extra hours to make sure this gets done, she doesn't want to be the one person who's just like, oh, well, let me just go off and do what I'm going to do with Andrew. She wants to stay, which I get. So she lets Andrew know that she'll be staying there, and that's that. So we see Issa driving over to Tiffany's to see the baby, and Issa is listening to an audiobook of Becoming by Michelle Obama. And it's actually at a point in the book where Michelle is actually talking about defining yourself and friendships with other women and bringing together new friendships and old friendships. That's really interesting given what we've seen so far this season. But she sees a spot right there in front of Tiffany's house, and she prepares to pull into the spot, parallel parking. And who should pop up but Molly? And so she sees Molly behind her, and she's like, oh, hey. And so, okay, cool. And so, okay. And Issa's like, I'm going. Molly's like, okay. I'm going. You just keep Issa is kind of over it, so she decides to drive off and pull around the corner. And let me tell you something right now. Parallel parking is already stressful enough. And trying to find a spot in certain neighborhoods and certain places is difficult enough. You see me trying to pull in. So I've said it 3 times that I'm trying to pull in. So I'm gonna keep backing up like I don't see you. And then when I tear your bumper up, please don't be upset. Because I'll be like, I told you I was going. So you want to continue to be petty? Okay. Well, now your bumper is torn up. So Issa decides to park in the church parking lot next to the strip club, which is a very interesting juxtaposition, but okay. And as she's walking up, she gets a voicemail from none other than Nathan. Now, I knew Nathan was going to be back in the picture pretty soon, but I just didn't know when. And he's just called to wish her well with the block party. He's heard about it and he's excited for her. So just giving her some general well wishes for now. For now. And so she and Molly walk up to Tiffany's door at the same time, and Issa's saying like, okay, you can drive me back since I gave you that spot. I'm gonna give you a spot that was already mine. I'm like, a spot that was already yours, even though you could clearly see me stop and back up into the space, and then you purposely went and tried to pull in the space like you saw it first. I'm like, you can get out of here with that. That was a no, but whatever. They basically are talking about Self-Care Sunday, saying they got to get back on track because apparently Sunday isn't really working that well for them because they're both really busy. But Issa kind of asks, well, you did still want to do that, right? I'm like, yeah. Issa's like, okay. See, all that high-pitched talking, like, no. Y'all are both lying, making yourselves feel like, yeah. And maybe they do want to do it, but they're not in a place where they genuinely are like, yeah, I would love the chance to hang out with you, even though we have issues. Like, no. So they both lying. We also see Derek having a conversation with Lawrence about his daughter and, you know, how worried he is about raising a daughter and knowing that at some point in the future she's going to have to deal with guys and everything that comes with that. And he kind of is recognizing that he's done some messed up stuff to women too, and all of those women was someone's daughter. It's interesting to me that a lot of men don't get the whole, hey, women are human beings, or women are people, until they have daughters. It's unfortunate that's what it takes for them to realize that, but yeah. And whether you're a man or a woman, you want to have respect for another person, but it just seems like with men, we can see women a certain way, but then they have daughters, and then they grow up, and then when other men see them the same way, then it's a problem. I'm like, well, I guess that's just how the cookie crumbles, doesn't it? So yeah, Derek has his reservations about really being a parent, and so Lawrence is like, well, I mean, don't worry about it. You guys are so organized. You guys always have a plan. So, I mean, you guys know what you're doing. Well, Derek admits that, well, yeah, we have a plan, but this plan still had 2 years left to go. We weren't planning to have a baby right now. People don't realize you can have your plan in order, but things happen, and it can happen in unexpected ways. Life comes at you fast. So in the living room, Issa, Molly, Kelly, and Tiffany, they're all having a little conversation, and you can tell Tiffany is happy that her daughter's here, but you can tell like she's a little off balance. Like her hair, her whole vibe, she's kind of like, like she's a little kind of like over it. Tiffany mentions to them that she wasn't feeling well when they went to the hospital, and she tried to tell the hospital and staff, and they really weren't trying to listen to her. Come to find out, she had a blood clot. Derek had to literally take charge and let them know like, hey, there's a serious issue. And I like that they brought this up on the show because unfortunately, that happens a lot. Issa even mentions the same thing happened to Serena, which it did. You can look up that story. But yeah, it's like when it comes down to Black women and the hospital and medical care, it's this reoccurring thing where Black women are trying to vocalize what's wrong with them, and the staff are like, oh, it's fine, it's fine. Do you understand that someone's life is in your hands? And it's not gonna hurt anything to check and see if something's wrong, because if you don't, that can lead to some really life-altering, life-threatening complications. So I'm glad they addressed that, because that is something that definitely happens a lot. Tiffany is talking about how much she appreciates Derek for stepping in that situation, and how supportive he's been. And Molly can relate, because Andrew is really supportive of her. Whatever she needs, he's there, and that's true partnership. Yes, Andrew is there for you, but does he enjoy being there for you? Questions that need answers. So Issa hears that. She's kind of like, I see you, Jada, red table talking. Just joking. So Molly's kind of like, oh, I was just making a point about how Derek is there for Tiffany. And Issa's like, yeah, it was just a joke. Which it was. I think Issa has some diapers, and so she asks Kelly, where do these go? And so Molly's just like, oh, I know you weren't here, but we decided that they go on near the changing table. Okay. Number one, I asked Kelly. I don't think the name Molly came out of my mouth. And number two, I'm aware that I wasn't here, which is why I asked. Thank you so much. See, now things are starting to get very microaggressive. It's these tiny little subtle moments of tension and awkwardness and weird vibes and all that. And the thing about me is I'm very direct. Now, I wasn't always that way, but I had to learn, like, look, I'm not gonna keep dancing around the issue. Okay, do you have a problem with me? And at this point, I understand that seems aggressive to some people, but I'd rather just get it out the way at this point. And there was a time where it seemed aggressive. I'm like, no, you don't just look. And I'm not saying I would necessarily just be like, "Arr," but that's very tiring. That's very draining. And no one has time to sit around trying to figure out what the issue is with someone when they're not being vocal about it. So you don't want to be vocal? I'll say it for you. What is the problem? And so Issa is talking to Kelly, who seems to have a very interesting obsession with Tiffany's breast milk. And she's just trying to figure out what's up with Molly. It just feels like Molly has this perception of Issa as just this really messy person who doesn't have it all together. So Kelly's like, well, maybe she has some stuff going on and she's just taking it out on you. Maybe you should talk to her. The same talk we needed to have like 2-3 months ago. I think they both are perceiving each other the wrong way. And that's clear because Molly is also having a conversation with Tiffany saying that, okay, I think Issa thinks that I don't want to be happy. And she keeps saying that, you know, I'm going to end up being the old Molly. At this point, Issa has stepped out to have a conversation with Lawrence. And so when Molly sees them, she's just kind of like, So when she's talking to Tiffany, she's like, yeah, she's saying, you know, I'm going to end up doing the whole old Molly thing, but she's doing old Issa. And I'm like, you don't know that at all. You're just assuming because that's already what you think in your mind. Tiffany says that, okay, I just think it's just a communication breakdown. I think you guys just need to talk. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. This is so triggering for me because direct communication is so important for me as I've gotten older. And if you are someone who knows how to communicate directly in a healthy way, seeing stuff like this will really aggravate you. So I kept watching this. I was just like, ugh. But that's how it happens. You create that distance and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the less you talk, the worse it gets. So Lawrence and Issa are outside. And Lawrence asks how Issa's doing. She's cool. She's just working on the block party, but she hasn't really heard from Condola and she's not really sure what's going on. Well, I actually have something to talk to you about. And then of course the phone buzzes. So Issa has to go take the call. I'm like, oh Lord. And I already knew we were not going to hear what he was going to ask. Issa gets on the phone and she finds out that her headliner, Schoolboy Q, has dropped out. And this is right after she went and printed all those flyers and put in all that work. So she's understandably frustrated, irritated, kind of devastated, I'm sure, because what do we do now? And we still have not heard from Condola. Lawrence realizes that she's really upset and he's just kind of like, oh, well, no, it's not a big deal. We can just talk about it later. I'm like, ugh. I know this has something to do with Condola. Unless it's like a family emergency or something real extreme, there's nothing that would be that serious to where you would just drop out and not be there to help out when we've been doing this together. See, here comes the foolishness. So Issa tries to have a brief little rap meetup with Mirror Issa, but Mirror Issa ain't feeling it at all. She's like, look, I can't be hyping you up. We can't be rapping today. I got stuff going on over here. Issa's like, oh, really? She's like, yeah, girl. My life is like yours, but worse. I noticed that both Issas, I guess, they both had on the NWA shirt. I thought that was cool. At this point, Issa is so desperate, she starts sending Beyoncé a DM. Talking about some, I am sick and my dying wish. I'm like, no, we ain't gonna do this today. And so she starts contacting all these various people that she knows good and well she's not even speaking to anymore. Does your brother still know that one person? Oh, he got shot? Oh. Did his phone get shot? Oh, his phone got shot too. Okay. I'm just like, in Issa's room, there's like it was on the wall. There's a picture I'm familiar with of Grace Jones, and it's like whoever did the painting kind of did like this alternative take on her. So I thought that was interesting too. So we see Molly and Andrew out on a date, and Molly is just expressing to Andrew how she appreciates him being flexible and him being there for her and really being understanding in regards to her working and all of that, right? Well, she has, you know, a good night planned out for them. She's talking about all the things they're gonna do. Well, I actually have some plans with my friends, and Molly's a little annoyed, but he assumed that she was just gonna be working again. And so she's like, but I had time. He's like, well, how would I know that? He feels like she works so much and he doesn't really know where he fits in Now, I understood where Andrew was coming from because I'm a big quality time person and I am understanding of people's schedules, but it can be a lot. I do my best to respect people and their time, but it is tough sometimes because, like, you respect the time, you understand the time, but also the process of wanting to spend time with somebody and not being able to is very, very frustrating. And I've been there, so I got it. But I also think that when Andrew met Molly, he knew that she was a lawyer. I'm not in the law field or anything like that, but I imagine law seems to take like a lot of time and a lot of effort if that's going to be a career path. And you already knew that that was her career and you knew it would take a lot of time. So I feel like that's kind of what you signed up for to an extent. His feelings aren't completely invalid, but there's a certain mindset or a certain understanding you have to have depending on the career that your significant other or your partner, whatever you would call it, might have. For example, being an actor, it requires you to film long stretches of time, many hours. You might have to film on location, which means you're going to be out of town. And then in some circumstances, if it's a romantic story or if it's a romantic film, you'll have to be intimate with another actor. This is how I have to think about this. There's a certain level of patience and understanding I have to have about it. So I get where Andrew's coming from, but I also understand as far as Molly, you want to be the best you can in your field. Like, you want to make time for both. I know it's hard finding the balance, but you have to kind of find the time for both. But ultimately, it doesn't really work for her to not have a job and to have Andrew. But if Andrew goes away, she still has a job. That's still something she has to be mindful of. So he actually offers to change the plans, but Molly's like, you know what, don't even worry about it. So now the date is all weird and awkward. We see Issa, and she is getting some food from a food truck. And she's just scrolling through Instagram and just kind of figuring out what she's going to do for this block party. And then all of a sudden, she sees a post for Live Nation. And then a light bulb goes off. So she calls Molly. Now, at first, when Molly sees the call, she's kind of like, you can tell she's like, what this girl want? But she answers the phone. And so Issa's like, hey, can we just talk? And you can really see on Molly's face, she's like, she gets happy. She's like, oh, okay, yeah. And so they've been needing to talk. So she's kind of like, okay, cool. And so she kind of starts by talking about how hectic things have been at her job. And she's wanting to just really tell Issa about some of the things she has going on. She's like, this week has been so busy. And she feels like she's juggling so much. And so Issa's just kind of like, ooh, dang, sorry, girl, that sucks. But what I need is only gonna take a minute. And I was like, okay. I saw a post for Live Nation and I realized that Andrew works for Live Nation and I might be able to find someone. Do you think you can ask him? Do you think you can help me out? And Molly's just like, ain't this about a... Okay, so that is not it. I understand you guys aren't in a good place, and that's fine. I understand that you guys haven't had the time to talk, and that's fine too. What you cannot do in those circumstances, you cannot avoid all these important conversations. And then the one time you call, it's like, oh, hey girl, I know you got a hookup, so can you help me out? That wasn't a good look. Because I know how I am, and I'm cool with everybody. But if you call me up and it's just for something like you can't even ask me how I'm doing, yeah, that's gonna be a problem. So we aren't cool enough for you to be outwardly nice or to have real conversations or hang out or anything like that. All this time has gone by and you feel like it's appropriate to ask me, oh, can you help me out with such and such? Whether you want to fake it until you make it or you want to at least try to have somewhat of an organic conversation, knowing that you need something, at least pretend like you care about the other person or how are you doing? How have things been? I don't really respect situations where people always need something, but they don't really give back. And so Molly is asking, well, did you do something to avoid the contract? Did something go wrong with the payments, this and this and that? And Issa's like, no, he just dropped out. She's like, well, you must have done something. It's like, look, once again, like Issa said, she assumes I'm just messy and I just don't have my stuff together. So she's assuming, even though she's been going through this entire process and all the stuff Condola has taught her, that somehow she must have done something to screw it up. So I'm like, this is just a mess. So Molly ends up having a conversation with Andrew later at his house. She basically admits that, look, I have never been in a relationship long enough to have to balance anything, to really have to figure things out like this. And we know that. We have seen Chris, Jared, Dro, Lionel, Quentin, and now Andrew. It's probably a couple more I'm missing, but yeah. And they have just come and gone. And she's kind of screwed all those situations up in one way or another. So she wants to actually work through things, which I was glad to see because Molly will just drop something with the quickness. And Andrew really wants to work things through also. He kind of thinks that their schedules might be incompatible, but he really is wanting to work things out. And so Molly tells him, hey, you are my main priority. So they're going to work things out. So Issa gets a call, and it's Molly, and Issa answers, and she's already doing her best friend song and dance because she knows that Molly came through, and she came through quick and just so excited. Well, Molly is called to let her know that, well, I didn't ask, and I'm not going to. And Issa's like, why? Did y'all break up? No, I just want to keep those parts of my life separate. This is a really important relationship to me, and I just want to protect it. What she really should have said was, well, I don't even feel like we're in a good space right now. I don't really like the fact that as soon as I'm thinking we're going to have a conversation, you're asking me for something. That just didn't really feel good to me. I'm wanting to share things about myself and you just need a favor. That didn't feel good. So I do believe that she wants to protect her relationship with Andrew. I also think she's using that as an excuse because the real issue is her and Issa. It's not keeping those two parts of her life separate. It's the fact that Issa and her are not in a good place. But rather than talk about that, we'll make it something else. And Issa's like, oh, okay. Because then it's like, well, you know I need help, and so you're just gonna intentionally not help me. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't look good on either side now. And it's interesting that Molly mentioned wanting to protect that relationship, but you don't seem to care enough about your friendship relationship to fix that. We are literally just tiptoeing around the main issue, and it is so frustrating. So now they're both just looking at each other sideways. And at this point, I can totally understand how we got to the place that we saw in that first scene of the first episode. It's like, yeah, this does not look good. Something I find that happens a lot of times is that when a friend gets into a romantic relationship, there's just a certain way they seem to approach their regular friendships. With certain people, they're so like, oh my gosh, I have a man, I have a woman, I am affirmed, I am loved. People get so into that sometimes unintentionally, they end up shoving their friends aside. Friends who have been around for long before this other person came along. Just the way they get prioritized sometimes is not good. Molly is so into this relationship, and her friendship with Issa is so fractured that I think she just kind of feels like, well, shoot, this is what I kind of need to focus on. This isn't really as much of a priority or an issue. And when she said main priority, I was just like, I already know what that means. And it is not going to be good. And no, it is not good. So Issa's day has really ended on a bad note. Mary Issa makes one last appearance. You know, you want to talk? Issa is over it. She just wants to take a shower, go to bed, and be done. She turns on the shower. Brown water comes out. So this episode ends on a very foul note. So that wraps up Low-Key Losing It. This episode was frustrating and triggering because, like I said, I've learned how to communicate a lot more effectively. I'm not saying it's perfect, but yeah, this was tough to watch because not only is it the demise of a friendship, and because of things that could be fixed with the conversation, but because no one is willing to express themselves and be honest, it's just like, we're just going to let this thing fall apart. So I can't imagine how things are going to go. I know the block party is coming up, so I can only imagine how that's going to go. So yeah. So until next time, this is D, Movie Man, signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.